We have a small path here, so maybe we can get across here. We'll find it.
What are we doing here?
What are we doing here? We're looking for a famous temple. The temple's called Kanapa Temple, and they have changed everything. They've closed the entranceway, so we have to beat our way through the bushes to find this temple, which is hidden here in the jungle. So let's see how it goes. Welcome to Tiruvannamalai, South India. We're here at the foot of the holy mountain Arunachala, and we're going to take a small journey around the mountain and the surrounding area to have a look at the various devotional practices that are the backbone of Indian culture. Devotion in India is intended to convert one's emotions, which arise from love of material objects and changing objects, into devotion for the unchanging, immutable self that lives in the hearts of all beings. Every full moon night, upwards of 1 million people visit Tiruvannamalai to circumambulate this holy mountain, Arunachala, which is one of the most dramatic symbols of devotion to God or the truth anywhere in the world. This incredible crowd is 1 million strong or thereabouts. Has come to the temple to begin their pilgrimage. These people are packed in line. It will take them 8 or 10 hours of standing in this incredibly packed positions to get to the inner sanctum and have the darshan of the deity. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people here, have been all day coming and coming and coming. Right now, we're in the middle of the Pradakshina circle. A Pradakshina is a circumambulation of the deity. The deity is Arunachala, the mountain. The idea is that self-inquiry and worship is continually having your mind, all of your thoughts, circling round and round and round your divine inner self, your divine consciousness. You could also see this as each one of us human beings has one thought in the mind of God, and all of us circumambulating constantly around the eternal presence of awareness that enlivens and enlightens the world. If you'll notice, there are ladies nearby who are selling these camphor pellets. The camphor pellets represent your ego, and before you worship, you offer your small little fire into the fire of self-knowledge or devotion for Ganesh. One of the most popular deities in India is Ganesh. Ganesh is the son of Shiva. Wherever you have a new beginning, there you find Ganesh. Ganesh will what? Remove the obstacles for your journey. So this temple is situated right at this point at which the Pradakshina road splits off from the main road. This deity is a prime example of the Vedas in code. Each one of these symbols represents a truth, an eternal truth about consciousness and about reality or about the self. The first symbol of Ganesh of interest is the belly. The belly is called a Lambodara. You'll see the same symbol in other Eastern traditions, the Happy Buddha, for example. The Lambodara symbolizes what? Fullness, completeness. The self, Ganesh, Ganesha. Ganesha means the Lord of the planets, the one who rules the world, which is a symbol of the self, is full. It's your own innermost self. It's full, it's complete, and it's whole. It doesn't need anything. It doesn't want anything. It's satisfied. The trunk is a symbol of discrimination. The trunk can go to the right or to the left. In this case, the trunk is to the right. It means he always chooses the right thing. He always chooses the dharmic thing. He always does what's appropriate in every situation. That's a person who knows who they are. Self-realized person, or Ganesh, person who knows themselves. Puranic culture didn't just happen. These deities didn't just happen accidentally out of the imaginings or the prattlings of a civilization in its early infancy. Not at all. They were consciously designed symbols that encode the Vedic knowledge to make it available in a hidden way, in a subconscious way to the worshipers. And they did this by what? Personifying these deities, giving them names and faces and lives, turning them into myths and stories. And then the artists came along and rendered these stories in the form of this iconography. The rat is a symbol of desire. Rats are always hungry. They have these teeth that are growing, and they have to chew. If they don't chew or eat, their teeth will grow through the top of their head and kill them. So this is a symbol of desire. And it's such a strange juxtaposition of desire and a human with an elephant head. In other words, this human with an elephant head is big, fat, satisfied and happy, and is riding on a tiny little rat. He's called Mushika. He's this vehicle. And this rat is at his feet. What does that mean? It means that he's a master of his desires. His knowledge of himself allows him to keep his desires under control at his feet. Normally an elephant has 2 tusks, but Ganesh only has 1 tusk. Although it may appear in the video that there are 2, actually one of those tusks is broken off. It's a symbol of non-duality. He only has one principle that he operates under. There's only one self that he understands himself to be. In his left hand is a sweet fruit. The sweet fruit is the result of this knowledge. It means pure bliss or pure limitless satisfaction. Parama Sukhadam, Brahmanandam. It means satisfaction or happiness. In the Vedic age, the deities were simple. They were the natural elements, the air, the fire, water, earth, and space. These were the basic elements, deities of that era. They were not fancy deities, complex deities like you find in the Puranic era. The Vedic era was called the Sat Yuga. The Sat Yuga is a time when people were basically sattvic, and the people, the rishis, lived in a forest environment. They were hunters and gatherers. The Brahmin class used to bring their children to these rishis, and they would live in the rishis' homes where they would learn the Vedas and learn this knowledge. And this kept the spiritual idea alive. This kept enlightenment and the whole spiritual culture alive. But when agrarianism started to happen, in other words, when human beings started to cultivate plants, then civilization developed, and because you could store grains and so forth, and people started clustering in cities. And that was the beginning of what's called the Kali Yuga, or the materialist age. People who are only interested in worldly things are materialists. And because of materialism, the interest in the knowledge declined. The people didn't send their children to the rishis to get spiritual knowledge. They put them to work in business, in pursuing money and wealth and so forth and so on. So the rishis were perplexed and they were dismayed because they were afraid that this great knowledge of who we are, this great non-dual knowledge, would get lost. And so they did a very interesting thing. They invented, you could say, the Puranas. In the old days, one had to use one's feet and one's body to get from one to a pilgrimage center, but it seems like today there's another mode of transportation for worshiping the self. This morning we were on our way to do some filming. In the parking lot of the hotel, we came across a very interesting symbol. The people in this vehicle are on a padayatra. Padaya means feet, yatra means a pilgrimage. And they're obviously not walking on their own 2 feet. The car, this Toyota, this modern Toyota, is what? Their feet. And when you go on a pilgrimage, you worship a particular deity. In this case, they're worshiping Murugan, or Kartikeyan, one of the sons of Shiva. And he's surrounded by the 18 siddhas, Tamil siddhas, who represent people who have attained the highest state of consciousness. You'll notice on the windshield a very interesting symbol. It's a Shiva lingam. Lingam means what? Consciousness. It's a sign of Shiva, of consciousness. Lingam is that phallic object in the top, and the yoni is the womb. And in the Vedic system of cosmology, creation is what? A combination of consciousness, the lingam, and the womb. So the idea of procreation is what is a symbol of the creation of the whole universe. It seems a little extravagant to take a pilgrimage in this kind of vehicle, so we'll continue on our pilgrimage around the mountain on foot. This is just a symbol of self-knowledge. The feet are understood to represent the knowledge of the self, because your feet stand under you. Understand, it's your understanding. And that's why the feet are holy here and are worshipped. I love this particular symbol of the cobra. And you'll notice that it's a symbol of the energy or the Shakti. The Shakti means all of nature, or all of Prakriti, or Maya. And it has 5 heads. And those 5 heads symbolize the 5 elements: air, fire, water, earth, and space. So it's a symbol of creation. They also symbolize the 5 sense organs, because they're related to the 5 elements, the 5 perceptive organs, and the 5 active organs, and the 5 pranas. Reality or consciousness, when Maya creates the material world, appears in this 5-fold aspect based upon these 5 elements. So it symbolizes matter and spirit together. A beautiful symbol. In this case, it's a goddess. Goddess means Shakti. Women are symbols of the self, of the self in the form of energy, the form of Shakti. And it's that Maya, or that Shakti, that creates the world out of non-dual awareness, non-dual consciousness. This one is a strange symbol. You see the bull here, the Nandi, is looking away from Shiva. Shiva is meant to be inside, and the mind is meant to be looking inward and meditating on the deity. But in this case, they evidently didn't understand the symbolism, because they put Nandi looking away from Shiva, which would symbolize an extroverted mind rather than introverted mind. Unfortunately, most people now that worship these deities don't understand the symbolism, But when you do start worshiping it with faith and devotion, your mind becomes calm and pure, and inquiry starts to happen, and then what? You become interested in the meaning of the symbols, and at that time, that meaning is revealed through the Vedanta to you. And it becomes what? An aid to your contemplation, an aid to your meditation, an aid to your inquiry. This is a particularly interesting ritual. To worship the self, you need to be naked, present yourself without any obstacles, without any impurities. And so by passing through this tiny slit, you're meant to remove all of your encumbrances and impurities and present yourself in your own natural state in front of the Lord. In a non-dual reality, every creature, every material object, and every living object is what? Is nothing but consciousness, your own self. And consequently, here the object to worship is an anthill. Worship is a spirit of offering or gratitude. You're not just begging for something, you're actually what? Expressing your devotion to the Lord, to the truth, to the self, in the form of that symbol. And so people bring an offering. They'll give money. The women will take off their bangles and offer it, whatever it is they have. You bring a fruit, a flower, even a drop of water, it says in the Gita, is sufficient for worshiping the self. We're going to Pachiyama Temple. Pachiyama Temple is an interesting temple. It's not traditionally Vedic. It seems like it's a Dravidian or local. Yeah, Vedic culture, Vedanta particularly, is called apurushe jnanam. Apurushe jnanam means not from the human mind. This knowledge doesn't come from human beings. It's not a philosophy or a school of thought or anything of the sort. It's revealed knowledge. And the rishis are the vehicles for the revelation of this knowledge. This knowledge comes to us, not from us. That's a very important point, because knowledge needs to be true to the object. The object is consciousness, is the truth, and we don't want our own personal biases and opinions getting in the way. So these rishis are just people who lived a long time ago, who didn't have any concepts about things, and who in deep meditation, right, saw these truths. Rishi means to see. Who saw these truths or heard these truths, and they encoded those truths in the form of language, originally just spoken language, but now in the form of scriptures, and that knowledge is brought to us in a pure and pristine form. Behind us we have a row of the 7 rishis. If you'll notice, they have certain symbols. The head represents a mind that's been cleansed or purified or cut off from its thoughts. And that is accomplished by this sword of discrimination. The sword of discrimination is the knowledge what I'm whole and complete, actionless, ordinary awareness. In other words, all my worries and concerns are based upon the thought that I'm incomplete and inadequate. And this knowledge, which is brought to us by the rishis, what removes those concept. It cuts off your head and puts it at your feet. Means your thinking is what? In service to or surrendered to the knowledge of who you are. On this rishi, You'll notice in his hand a small rectangular device. That symbolizes the scripture. So the rishis are the ones that bring the scripture, the knowledge of, what is the scripture? The knowledge of who you are. The knowledge of the total, Ishvara or God, and the knowledge of who I am, and the connection between Ishvara, God, and my innermost self. The snake represents the Shakti. The Shakti is the energy that creates the whole universe. And that scripture is based on the knowledge of the universe. The Vedanta is an analysis of experience. It's not moral precepts or beliefs. It's actually based, our scriptures are actually based upon a knowledge of the nature of experience. And the cobra, the snake, represents what? The energy of the whole creation and the knowledge of the creation. Snakes are an important symbol in Indian iconography. They're particularly important because they live underground. So this knowledge is hidden or underground, it's subconscious. And the scripture is meant to reveal what's present but unknown to us. This rishi has in his hand a noose. The noose is meant to go around the neck of the devotee and lift him or her out of the ocean of samsara. So this symbol is a symbol of salvation. The self or the knowledge saves you from what? From suffering, from samsara, from a life of being and a life of becoming. One more symbol that needs to be explained. You'll notice that the rishis have big buggy eyes. Their eyes are always open and always seeing. That's a symbol of the self. The self is always seeing. It's never asleep. It's never in ignorance. It says in the Bhagavad Gita, the self is speaking. In whatever form you worship me, in that form I reveal myself to you. So when you worship a deity here, then you get in contact with this source of love that's in yourself, and you have this experience. We call it a darshan. That's the beauty of India. That's why India is the #1 spiritual superpower in the world. Because literally hundreds of millions, maybe more than hundreds of millions, probably 500 million people or more, worship regularly here the deities. And those deities are just stand-ins or proxies for the self. The animals came for the prasad after the puja. Whenever you do a puja, then there's a result, and the result is holy food. Your food is sanctified, your offerings are sanctified by the worship itself. Indian society worships another kind of rishi, a rishi in training, sadhus. They live on alms and are supported by the temples, are fed by the temples, and they're not beggars in the sense that we understand beggars in the West. They're men of considerable dignity and spiritual resolution, and men who have renounced the world to contemplate or meditate or worship the self. And as such, there are symbols of the self, because the person who has totally devoted to the truth, to God or to the self, that person is what? Free of attachment to worldly objects. And this culture, unlike our own, values renunciation. It's one of the primary values for cultivating a spiritual personality. You want some bakshish? There's a saying they have here in India, which is that even Mahalakshmi is the goddess of wealth. Mahalakshmi would become broke at 20 minutes in any Indian street. No matter how much money you give, it's never enough. There are two kinds of mantras. One, mantras for bhakti or devotion, to give you an experience of the self, and identity mantras, Vedanta mantras, which are meant to be contemplated for their meaning. The meaning of all those mantras, those identity mantras, is the same. They're non-dual mantras. In other words, they indicate the non-separation of the individual, the worshiper, the person, and the world. And those mantras are meant to be contemplated upon. They're not meant to make you feel good. If you understand the meaning of those mantras, you'll feel good forever. Whereas if you chant a mantra just for bhakti, just for feeling, and they'll make you feel good for a few minutes, a little bit, and then you'll come back down into your normal state of mind again. They'll always keep you separate from the thing you're worshiping. So you'll say, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namo Narayana, Govindaya Namaha, so forth and so on. There, Govinda, the self, or Shiva, the self, is thought to be something away from you, apart from you. Something that you're meant to experience. You're connect to. Yoga means to connect. And but Vedanta says there's no separation between you and Shiva. You are Shiva. Now that's a difficult fact to realize for some people. So you need to think about that, and you need to be taught what Shiva is, and so forth and so on, and how to contemplate or how to inquire is the purpose of the identity mantras that you find in the Vedanta. This path that we're standing on now leads to a cave on the side of the mountain called Skanda Ashram. It's not really an ashram as such, as we imagine ashrams to be. It's simply a cave where Ramana Maharshi, the great sage of Arunachala, who realized his own innermost self when he was 17, lived and meditated on consciousness, on his self, for many, many years. Yeah, there are two ways to worship the self, directly and indirectly through a form or a symbol. The women and men that you see here dressed in orange, red-orange, they're called Shakti Bhavas. Shakti Bhavas are people who worship energy, not in the way that Westerners worship energy. They worship the form of the energy that creates the whole universe. That energy that creates the whole universe is called Parashakti, and is symbolized, is considered to be a female, a woman. And the union of Shiva and Shakti, spirit and matter, is the creation. So you don't have to look very far to worship the self, because the self appears here in the form of all these objects, all these material objects that we see, our thoughts, our feelings, and the material world around. Ramana was a sage because he understood that the difference between the self and the seeker was exactly zero. If I want to erase that difference, I'm going to need a means of knowledge. Because the distance being zero, there's nothing I can do to get what I already have. Therefore, Vedanta. Vedanta is a means of knowledge for the self. It's a time-tested, proven means of knowledge that will deliver to you the freedom that you seek. This is the main temple, Arunachala. It's a fire temple. There are 5 temples in South India, symbolizing the 5 elements. This temple is situated at the foot of Arunachala, which you'll see in the distance. The idea of the temple is set up as a journey metaphor. You come in from the south side, from the lowest level, and then you gradually move up step, step, step to the inner sanctum. It's a symbol of the journey of the self from the lower to the higher. And the temple itself is part of that journey to what? To the transcendent, luminous, non-dual consciousness symbolized by Arunachala, the mountain in the back. In the background is a gopuram. It's a temple gate. It's the entrance to the temple. There are 4 gopurams on each temple, representing the 4 cardinal directions and the 4 elements: air, fire, water, and earth. So it's through the elements, through the time and space continuum, that you enter into the sacred space of Arunachala, the inner self. You will notice the temple on this gopuram is shaped like hands, pointing to that ineffable, indescribable, and apparently indefinite something called yourself. These devotees are coming on a pilgrimage to Ayappa in southern India. It's a very large pilgrimage. It goes from November through January. So as many as 25 or 30 million people will make this pilgrimage. The temple is at a place called Sabrimala on a mountain. And these people go to all the basic temples in South India. Ayappa is a very interesting deity. Ayappa was born from the union of Shiva and Vishnu. Vishnu became a woman and Shiva became a man, and they had a son called Ayappan. And that Ayappan symbol was created by the rishis to avoid sectarianism. In other words, when you worship this deity, you can know that you're worshiping Shiva and Vishnu in one package. So you can't think that Shiva's different from Vishnu or Vishnu's different from Shiva. That's Ayappan. Swamiye, Shanamaho, Swamiye. In any case, this gopuram represents the planes of consciousness, the levels of awareness or consciousness in the creation. From the gross level on the bottom, the foundation, the material foundation for the creation, right on up through the intermediate dimensions and intermediate levels, intermediate planes of experience, all the way to the very subtlest level at the very top of the creation, at the very beginning of the creation, the Maya level. The cow that you see is called Nandi. It's a symbol of devotion. It symbolizes a mind that's turned toward Shiva, toward the inner self. They use a cow as a symbol here because cows are sattvic. Sattvic means they're calm and peaceful. When your mind is calm and peaceful, the self, the Shiva inside, reflects in your mind, and you become attracted and worship it, and you start to love it. Devotion is love. The word Nandi means the one who delights the heart. It's a symbol of love, or the love of God. This Nandi is turned toward the mountain and toward the inner sanctum where the Shiva Lingam is. The Shiva Lingam, the mountain, is a symbol, Arunachala, a symbol of the self, a symbol of your own innermost consciousness, your own innermost awareness, your own true self. This little shrine in which it is has 3 layers. Those three layers represent the three bodies and the three states of consciousness, from the gross level of existence on the bottom level to the subtle level of existence, the mental level, the mind and the thoughts that are operating in the universe, and the causal level, or the creation of the universe. And then at the very top, the symbol is the self. All of this whole creation comes from this one bindi, this one point, symbolized by that ball, that copper ball on the top. It explodes down into manifestation and becomes the whole creation. I absolutely love India, not just for the spirituality of it, but for the art. This creature is a vahana, or a vehicle for the deity. They say that the deities become tired of being worshipped in their little inner sanctums all the time, and they need to get out and have a day off. So they often take them out of the temple on these vahanas. You'll notice on this one two very interesting symbols or features. The eye on the bowl is extremely conscious. Eyes are a symbol of light, and your inner self is consciousness or awareness or spirit, and it's always shining. And this light is always open, always aware. God is watching you, you could say. And in this case, they've done a very interesting thing. I've never seen it before, but you have eyes, two eyes or faces on the legs. It means everything, all parts of the self, all parts of the body and all parts of existence are nothing but what? The eye of consciousness appearing in various forms. In this case, the legs. At the entrance of every shrine or temple, there's a symbol that tells you what the deity to be worshipped is that's in that temple. And here we have a very strange symbol for those of us who are born in the West. The deity here is Ramana Maharshi. Normally, one wouldn't worship a human being. But those exceptional human beings who have, through their life and through their teaching and through their example, revealed to us their knowledge of themselves, their divine self, become objects of worship here. In India, they don't worship the person himself, but the person becomes a reflection or a symbol of the self, and the worship or the love goes through the object, through the person, to the self. So when you're worshiping Ramana, you're actually worshiping your own self in human form. And that's a very unusual idea. It's based upon the idea that reality is non-dual and that everything here in this apparently material or profane world is actually worthy of worship because it's all nothing but consciousness, your own self. I've just come up these stairs from a very, very important spiritual location. There's a lingam, a Shiva lingam, in the basement here, underground, where Ramana Maharshi, after his enlightenment, sat for weeks, I think, a long time, in a state of total inner absorption, worship on the self. He was completely unaware of his body and his surroundings. His mind was turned inward. His senses were shut down. He couldn't feel anything or hear anything that was going on in the world outside. And eventually the insects started to eat him. He was bitten by ants. They got infected. He got septicemia. And at that time, some of the sadhus who knew about him there told Seshadri Swamigal, who was a very famous guru here at that time, about this young man who was sitting there and who in samadhi and was about to die or pass on. And Seshadri Swamigal said, take him out of there, clean him up, and let's save him, because he's a Mahapurusha, a great man, a great devotee. And they did. They removed him, cleaned him up, got him healed, and he moved further on up the mountain. He devoted his whole life, in fact, to the mountain. He never left the environs here, the environment here, worshiping in a cave first called Virupaksha Cave, and later on moved further on up the mountain to continue his worship of Arunachala in a cave now called Skanda Ashram. Eventually, people found him here, and after many years of living a life of solitude and meditation, he agreed to move down below on the main road, had an ashram built where he retired for the rest of his life. In our countries in the West, we don't feel comfortable with the idea of death. Death, it represents the end of life, and it's thought to be the end of everything. But in India, they're very comfortable with death. We're here at the Yama Lingam. Lingam means a sign, and Yama means death. So this is a place where you worship death. Puja is worshiping the death lingam. I'm standing sideways for a purpose, for a reason. There's part of the symbolism of the temple worship. And the symbolism is that you can't look at life or death directly. You have to look at it indirectly, death being a symbol of the self. So you have to look away from it and then turn your head toward it, because the light of death and the light of life is so bright and so brilliant, it will blind you. I've just taken the sacred ash here and put it on my forehead. It's a symbol of how the fire of death burns down your tendencies and inclinations and leaves you free to understand yourself. When I first came to India, I lived in a cave on the banks of the Ganges River. And I was sitting one day in meditation on the side of the river, and I noticed what I thought was a log floating down the river. And as I couldn't tell exactly, but as it floated into view, I realized it was a dead body. And on that body was sitting a crow. And the crow was picking the eyeball out of the body. And it was a very important moment for me spiritually, because it brought home to me very clearly the meaning of the word death. That we're all here, every second we're living with death. Death means change and time. Every minute it's sitting on our shoulder, looking over our shoulder, informing and changing everything and affecting everything that we think and do and feel. We're at the Agni Lingam. Agni means fire. Fire is one of the most prominent symbols of awareness of the self, because it provides two things. It provides light and heat. Light is a symbol of consciousness, and heat is a symbol of love. So the self is incarnated in the form of this fire, and it's worshipped as a symbol of the self. Pujari is now worshiping, he's showing the light to the lingam. Light means he's offering his own consciousness, a reflected consciousness of the devotee to the pure consciousness, the light of awareness in the form of this lingam. And he's offering with some flowers. And now he comes, once the puja is completed, then he brings the light back to us, it's been worshipped, and gives us prasad in the form of the ashes, which we adorn on our forehead. It symbolizes death, the death of your personal egocentric desires. Your own vasanas are reduced to ash in the fire of this worship, in the fire of this puja. Prasad. The prasad is khichdi or sweet rice. It's a symbol of the sweetness, the love of the self. The final part of the ritual of worship is to offer something back. The devotee, it's his duty, the devotee or the pilgrim or the seeker, to distribute the prasad to the poor, so forth. And that's why you see the sannyasis congregated outside of the places of worship here, because it's the duty of a seeker to contribute to the spiritual culture. And I gave him some money, and in return he gave me a Rudraksha mala. Rudraksha mala is a symbol of Shiva. Shiva means consciousness, pure consciousness, what's always good in all places at all times. So we worship in ourselves in the form of this consciousness, and we get this symbol as a result of the worship. We're on our way now through this snake-infested forest in search of a temple dedicated to Kanapa, a Nayanar, particular type of Paramahamsa who revealed non-dual devotion to the truth through an outrageous act. Careful. Here we are, cool. And the temple's open. That's so great. We found the back way. Great. I guess Bhagawan wants us to come here. These rocks are what they call power points. That's where they put temples, wherever there's ley lines or wherever there's special power sources. And these particular rocks have a lot of Shakti coming out of them. And when you sit there and you meditate just on the upside, you could feel it if your mind is quiet. This temple is dedicated to Kanapa, the woodcutter. Kanapa was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. He was lower caste, and temples were not open to lower caste people at that time in general. Kanapa was well liked and he was allowed to worship there. People thought he was just a normal, everyday devotee. And if you understand the way these temples are constructed, in all these temples, it's dark inside. It's a kind of theater where you create a kind of atmosphere. The darkness symbolizes Maya, or ignorance. And in that ignorance, the five sheaths, it's called, Pancha Kosha Vilakshanam, said the self is hidden in the five sheaths, in this shrouded in ignorance or darkness. And in the center of that darkness is this deity, is this awareness. The deity represents Shiva, Krishna, whatever the deity is, represents awareness or consciousness. So that darkness is illumined by consciousness. And in this particular case of Kanapan's case, he was worshiping a plain stone lingam. But when they worship it, they put a lot of flowers around it, so it would look like hair. And then they also put two reflect objects and tied a few inches below the top of the lingam, so that when you come into the darkness, it gives the appearance that there's actually some living being there staring at you. The eyes being symbols of consciousness, because the eyes project light onto the material world. Consciousness reflects off the mind through the senses and illumines the material world. Now in this case, the symbol is consciousness looking back at us. So when you bow down in your devotional state and you look up at the deity, it feels like there's actually a presence there. And that presence that you're feeling in the lingam is actually the presence of your own self. And that's at that point through this worship, through this devotion, you come in contact with yourself and you experience this peace and this bliss and this joy and so forth and so on. Now on a particular morning, there were many people worshiping, and Kanapa came, and when he bowed down, he looked up at the deity for just to get his darshan from the Shiva, and the eyes had fallen off. Those little discs that put there to symbolize the eyes had fallen off. And he was in a devotional mood, and he thought that Shiva had lost his eyes. They actually feel that when you're in that state, you actually feel that the deity is there, that the lingam itself is alive and giving you the darshan. It's a projection, but it works. And so he thought, oh, this is terrible. How can this be? Shiva has no eyes. How can he give darshan to all these devotees? And how can I get my darshan from the Shiva? And so then he thought, I'll give him my eyes. So he got up and he walked into the inner sanctum, which was unheard of, and he took his knife. He was a woodcutter. He took his knife and cut out one of his eyes, found some string, and tied it on the lingam where the eyes were supposed to be. And then he thought, now, when I give him my other eye, I'll be blind. And I won't be able to know where to put the eye. And I must put the eye in the proper place so that Shiva can give his darshan. How will I know where to put it? He said, I know what I'll do. And he stood on one foot and he took his toe and he put his toe on the spot where the eye was supposed to be. Feet being a symbol of surrender. And then he reached for his knife to cut out his eye, and then Shiva appeared. I don't remember all the details about it, but the Shiva appeared as a living being, as a conscious living being in there, and said, take it easy, no need to sacrifice your eyes, I'm here to give you the darshan, and so forth and so on. And then at that time, everybody realized that this Kanapa was a Mahapurusha. A Mahapurusha means a great soul who had non-dual vision, had non-dual unconditional love, and saw no difference between himself, his body, and the body of Shiva, and was ready to sacrifice his own body for the sake of the Lord. We're here in Ramanashram to worship Ramana's favorite pet, named Lakshmi. Ramana said that this was an enlightened cow. And it seems to me that if a cow can get enlightened, any one of you can get enlightened as well. The chanting is a poem or a song in Tamil that Ramana wrote, worshiping the self in the form of a cow. This worship continues for the next day throughout South India. We're now in the Ramanashram cowshed, where the priests are worshiping the cow. And the cow is worshipped as a symbol of the self because it gives milk. Milk is a symbol of bliss or happiness. So by worshiping yourself, you gain the supreme or ultimate happiness. It seems that no aspect of the cow and its life, it goes unworshipped here. As you will notice, people are taking blessings from the cow poop. These cows have been garlanded and worshipped properly on this special day. The word cow in Sanskrit means go. The go means a cow. And go is the light, so it's a symbol of the light of consciousness or the light of your own self. And it's a beauty of this culture is that they're keeping this idea of this tradition alive. The Pongal ceremony is a symbol of the harvest season. In other words, the bounty of the Lord giving us all these things, and we're giving back to the Lord our thanks, our gratitude for this wonderful creation. Our final ritual is a charming ceremony. The self is worshipped in the form of an offering of food to all the living creatures. It's called a yajna. Yajna means a sacrifice. A sacrifice in Indian culture means a contribution. Before a woman begins her day and cooks for her family and so forth and so on, she offers a handful of food to the self, to the Lord, to the God, in the form of rice flour to the ants and to small creatures. This is called a yajna. It's part of the karma yoga ritual, is to look after all the conscious beings in the universe before you think of yourself. If you think about it, it's really quite amazing that we will drive into a fast food, grab our hamburger and eat and drive off in 5 minutes to consume our food. And these people will spend 2 or 3 hours in the evening saying thank you to the Lord in the form of this ritual. As time passed, the designs got more and more and more complex. Originally it was just a handful offered with a mantra, and now the forces, the powers, the structure of the whole creation is symbolized in the form of these columns. This particular column is very interesting because you'll see a bird in the center. That's a swan. The swan is called a Paramahamsa. The Paramahamsa is a symbol of the self. And from the center, this whole flower, this whole mandala of existence spreads out. She's adding layers, rings, concentric rings. So from the center of the self, from the universe, all the names and forms come exploding out in these forms and colors. You can see the whole cosmology in an artistic form on a daily level. It's still today in the 21st century. Your inner self, the object of your devotion, provides you with the light of consciousness so that you can know and understand objects. And it also supplies you with the love that's necessary to understand and worship and live here successfully in this body. So fire is a symbol of consciousness. The texts call it the fire of consciousness. These people worship fire intensely and with great understanding and beauty, as you can see in these rituals. I hope that our exploration of this holy mountain and the ritualism of southern India has been as entertaining and informative for you as it has for me. My hope is that this video will be an introduction to the ideas and the culture behind the devotional rituals and practices of India. The ideas of non-duality, oneness and wholeness are enshrined in the ancient texts of India called the Vedas and are presented in the science of devotion and knowledge called Vedanta. I am a teacher of Vedanta. I've just finished a seminar here, a 3-week seminar here in Tiruvannamalai on the topic of self-knowledge and devotional practice. And it's hoped that if you're interested in healing your emotions and developing a positive a devotional core to your personality and for your life, that you check the website, shiningworld.com. There we have the most comprehensive non-dual website on the web. All of the information, tons of information there, free for your own benefit. We have discussions, more than 5,000 or 6,000 pages of discussions on this topic of self-knowledge and devotional practice. We have books. I've just released a new book called Essence of Enlightenment, which is on this same topic. We have videos in our shop, reasonably priced videos, and a handful of teachers also who are happy to answer your questions on any of these topics. Thank you very much for watching this video, and hope to see you in the Sacred Heart of India sometime. Namaste.